European Parliament, the European Commission, the European Court of Auditors, the European Court of Justice, MEPs, Brussels, Strasbourg, Brexit. The EU seems really complicated. It's made up of 7 EU institutions and even more lower-level bodies spread out over 4 countries with hundreds of buildings and employees traveling back and forth. To make it even more confusing, 2 of these institutions sound the same and sit in the same building while having different functions. The European Council, not to be confused with the Council of the EU, which is also known colloquially as Council of Ministers. Confused yet? Tell me about it. This complexity is one of the reasons why some experts say many Europeans are indifferent about EU politics. More than half of them didn't even vote in the last European elections. But the EU, and especially its laws, are important. It represents roughly 500 million people spread over 28 countries. Take that in for a second. The EU doesn't just make laws that affect these people, from what they can buy at supermarkets to where they can live. Many of these laws also have an impact on the rest of the world. Think agriculture, food standards, trade agreements, data protection, consumer rights, climate change, migration. So let me break down for you how a European law actually gets proposed and voted on, who's involved, and why it's so complex. Because of course, there's a reason for that. In order for 28 different nations to agree on common rules and regulations, with everyone having a fair share and say, a complex system had to be established that grew more and more so the more nations joined the Union. By design, the EU was organized in a way to create checks and balances and make sure that no one, not one country or institution or person, has all of the power. So when it comes to lawmaking, here's how that was done. It all starts with the European Council. That's the institution that gets to decide on the general direction and the priorities of the EU. This is where the leaders of all EU member states, so think Merkel, Macron, Sanchez, meet together with the president of the European Council, currently this guy here, Donald Tusk, to set the political agenda of the EU. Next, the political agenda is passed on to the European Commission. This is the main organization in the EU that proposes new laws, but cannot vote on them. That's important. It's another way of diverting power. There are 28 commissioners. Each member state gets to appoint 1 to represent them, another measure to reinforce checks and balances. Together with the president of the Commission, currently Jean-Claude Juncker, these commissioners debate which laws they think should be passed. Once the commissioners have agreed on a law they'd like to propose, it gets handed to 2 other EU institutions, the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union. These are the only 2 institutions within the EU that get to adopt laws. Most of the time together, sometimes alone, it depends. I told you it's complicated, but I'll walk you through it, so bear with me. Let's start with the European Parliament. It's the 2nd biggest parliament in the world, and it's the only organization within the EU where representatives, or MEPs, are directly elected by the European people every 5 years. Each member state gets a fixed number of MEPs proportional to their population. Their most important task is to debate and vote on laws suggested by the Commission, from a ban on single-use plastics to limits to banker bonuses, capping the price of mobile phone calls within the EU, and the safety of e-cigarettes. But here's the catch. Even if the MEPs agree a law should be passed, they cannot do it alone. They do so in what's called a co-decision with the Council of the European Union. This is the institution where the governments of the EU member states have their say and defend their national interests. The Council is comprised of the national ministers of each member state, for example, the Minister for Environment, Agriculture and Fisheries, or Justice and Home Affairs. In the vast majority of cases, a law can only pass if both the European Parliament and the Council agree it should be adopted. Why? Yep, you got it, checks and balances. Okay, deep breath, you've almost made it to the end. Well done. 3 more institutions to talk about. There's the European Court of Justice, basically the EU Supreme Court. It's comprised of 1 judge from each member state. I don't have to do the whole checks and balances thing again. I think you get it by now, right? They make sure countries and EU institutions abide by EU law. There's also the European Central Bank, which is based in Frankfurt, to symbolize its independence from political control. And there's the European Court of Auditors. But both of these institutions deal with money instead of laws. So I won't bother you with details. So what have we learned today? Well, that there are a lot of EU institutions in different cities with different roles and functions. Some set the agenda, others propose new laws, others vote on them, and others still make sure they're being followed. But it's this complex structure that makes it less likely that one country, institution, or person can become too dominant. So it may be hard to keep up with who's doing what and who's in charge, but that's exactly the point. In the end, It's all about consensus. And in times like these, isn't that an achievement in itself?
Europe mean? On April 18, 1951, the Schuman Declaration led to the foundation of the European Coal and Steel Community, ECSC, by Belgium, the Federal Republic of Stop. Let's not focus on data. The end of World War II was one crucial starting point, the network and cooperation of those branches of industry which were relevant for the military was to prevent new wars and to lead to enduring peace, an ageless desire we just too easily tend to forget. Of course, everybody was also fighting against the next upcoming madness, the Cold War, another big issue. Today's European Union includes 27 countries. That's nearly 500 million EU citizens, which means that we make up 7% of the world population, acquiring more than 30% of nominal gross world product. Out of 500 million EU citizens, 375 million are eligible to vote. There's not much difference between the parties of the 27 member states. The most important are the conservatives on the right and the socialists on the left, both intending to stand close to the middle. Then there's the Greens, the Nationalists, and the Liberals. These national parties have formed the political parties represented in the European Parliament. These European parties again can ally to fractions in the EU Parliament, but also individual national parties which don't want to unite with the European Party can join these fractions. Some parties even split up their representatives into two different fractions. The EU Parliament plays a crucial role within the European Union. Other, actually sometimes even more important roles are performed by the European Council, the European Commission, and the Council of the European Union, colloquially referred to as Council of Ministers. The European Council comprises the heads of government of the Union's member states, along with the President of the European Commission. This is where the power of the national decision makers is cumulated. The presidency of the European Council rotates every 6 months between the member states. The same goes for the President of the Council of Ministers. There's a reason why the biannual meeting of the Commission is called EU Summit. At these meetings, the national leaders try to agree on a concerted line of action. At best, they will proclaim guidelines and objectives for European politics, but won't be involved in everyday legislative procedures. Unfortunately, it is more likely that national interests are in the fore and that their countries judge their heads of government by the benefits they were able to reap for their countries. This results in very fierce negotiations, which often lead to personal disputes, and onward to traditional horse trading, which helps everyone to save his face. Every decision in the European Council has to be made anonymously. The President of the European Commission, who is part of the European Council, is conveniently appointed to this post by the Council, now called Council of Ministers, though so that their decision does not have to be anonymous and that no dissent can lead to further horse trading. This is where the EU Parliament comes into play for the first time. It has to agree upon the decision made by the heads of government. As soon as the members of the European Council have settled on a political direction, the President of the Commission reports it to the European Commission, which should pursue this political direction and act in accordance to it. The European Commission consists of 27 commissioners. Currently, each country puts up its own commissioner. Each member country proposes commissioners for different departments, which will be assorted by the President of the Commission, the factual head of the EU government. These commissioners, again, have to be approved by the Parliament. The European Commission is the sole organ of the EU that may propose new laws, which will be heard, altered, refused, or accepted by the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament. As long as no decision is made, the draft proposal can be withdrawn by the Commission. The Council of Ministers consists of the heads of the respective departments in the particular national governments. There are different.
Okay, hi everyone. And all right, so let's go to our cyber campus and let me make sure you can see this and go to cyber campus. and click on attendance, and week 4, add, and your smart attendance number is 186. 186 is your smart attendance number, 186. Okay, and I put that in the chat. And today's our short class, and so we don't have too much time. And that video I was showing you, of course, is 10 years old, so it's quite elderly. And of course, the European Union has changed quite a bit over the last 11, 12 years since I think that video was first produced. And but let's talk a bit now about the information in your reading for the week, and that is on the institutions of the European Union. And now we're getting to the institutions of the European Union, and make sure I share the screen. And the European Commission, that's the most important body in the European Union policymaking process, because the European Commission is the only organization within the European Union that can formally propose legislation, drafts of legislation, written out drafts of legislation for then the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament to consider, to debate, to amend, to vote on, to accept, to reject. This formal process of approving and making new European Union laws governing the single market or the monetary policies of the European Union in regard to, for example, the pandemic requires that the European Commission first propose the draft legislation. And so the European Commission is considered to be the executive branch of the European Union, insofar as it manages the day-to-day functioning of the European Union, but with, of course, the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers having to play the role of legislatures in approving draft legislation that the European Commission proposes. And again, the main challenge as we started the semester off in terms of understanding the European Union as a project to institutionalize cooperation and prevent negative, escalating, intensifying conflicts among the nations of Europe is nationalism, right? Nationalism. But nationalism is simply there. It's a fact. Nationalistic sentiment among many French people, among many German people, among many Italian people, obviously among many British people, Polish people, Greek people, it's there. And you have to deal with it. And you have to accommodate it. And you, in fact, ideally, you want people in Germany, France, Italy, Greece to believe that their nation, because they typically feel emotional and loyal to Germany or France or Italy, that their nation is benefiting by cooperating with the other nations of Europe, that it's good for Italy. If you're an Italian, you love Italy, it's good for Italy to be in the European Union. Even if that requires the Italians cannot, for example, set their own immigration policy because they have to consult and agree with the other 26 member states of the European Union, for example. That's one of many possible examples. And so this challenge of nationalism is evident in the European Commission, in that, for example, as was shown in that video I was highlighting, that is, as I said, it's a few years old. In the Treaty of Lisbon, which was adopted and came into force in 2009, the European Commission was considered to be too big. And they wanted to reduce the size of the European Commission from 27 members to 18 members. And because 27 members of the European Commission seem to be too big to find all of them important, critical roles to play in the European Commission. And right now, currently, every member state of the European Union has the obligation or has the right to submit one individual from each country to be on the European Commission. So there's 27 members in the European Commission. I'm sorry, 27 member states in the European Union. That means that there's 27 members of the European Commission, one from Ireland, one from Lithuania, one from Estonia, one from Bulgaria, one from Germany, one from France, one from so on and so on. And that proposal to reduce the size of the European Commission was supposed to be implemented as part of the Lisbon Treaty that was approved 12 years ago, and it's never been implemented. So the European Commission is still big at 27 members because the requirement or the goal to reduce the size down to 18 was not implemented because of too much nationalist opposition from the member states, particularly the small countries, the small members. And in particular, I have in mind Ireland. Ireland is only 4.5 million people. Ireland has a belief that they have been abused historically, particularly by the British, by the English, by England. And only obviously in the last 100 years have they become an independent country since they left the British Empire, the Republic of Ireland. But the point is, Ireland is very sensitive as a small country about being potentially dominated by bigger countries. And so Ireland resisted approving the Lisbon Treaty when the first draft of the Lisbon Treaty was proposed to Ireland for Ireland to approve, along with all the other members of the European Union, to approve the new draft of the new Lisbon Treaty that was signed obviously in Lisbon, Portugal. Ireland rejected it in a referendum because the Irish have to vote as a people, as a nation, on each treaty of the European Union when it comes up for approval. And the first time Ireland rejected it. And to get Ireland to approve it, the European Union leaders had to agree unofficially, but still explicitly, that they are not going to implement the 18 limit number on European commissioners. And so even though it's in the Lisbon Treaty, they have never gotten around to implementing it. And they probably won't because they already have enough trouble in dealing with crises like the pandemic and the rise of populism and nationalism in Poland and Hungary. They probably won't reduce it because they don't want to generate more anxiety and security, particularly among the more Eurosceptic countries and the smaller countries in the European Union. They're always very sensitive to this, to the concern that the European Union is dominated by the big countries, and they are in danger of being overwhelmed politically and economically and by their big neighbors in Germany or to a lesser extent France or elsewhere. So the Commission is the organization that does not all the thinking, but most of the thinking. Because if any of you have been involved in student government, for example, or any kind of organization, you know that you will experience, if you don't know already, that if you are the person or unit in organization responsible for coming up with the first written draft of a new policy or a new proposal, you do 80% of the work. If you are responsible for coming up with the first written proposed draft of a new policy or new legislation in any organization, you end up doing 80% of the work because people rely upon you to come up with an idea that they can criticize and critique and modify and amend and modify. But they're still amending and modifying what you proposed. So chances are it's not going to be very different from what you came up with, because what you came up with typically required a lot of work as the writer of the first draft. You had to talk to people, you had to know what was already possible and feasible, you had to know what the issues and the details of the policy controversy and the history of that policy controversy. So the Commission is, in a sense, the brain of the European Union. As having said that, the European Council, maybe that's the heart of the European Union, because the European Council is the name given to the meeting of the heads of government of state of all and state of all the member states. So the top official in each country goes to Brussels at least twice every 6 months or 4 times a year, whether that's Chancellor of Germany, the Prime Minister of Italy, the Prime Minister of Spain, the President of France, and so on. The most powerful individual in that country, the chief executive, they all meet together. And they are, whereas the European Commission might be, for example, the executive branch of the European Union, the European Council is sort of like the board of directors, right? The board of directors in an organization, whether it be a corporation or a university, they are not involved in the day-to-day details, operating details of the organization. But they have power over the executive, over the chief executive. And they give overall strategic direction to, in this case, the European Commission. So the European Commission, and particularly the president of the European Commission, which is now Ursula von der Leyen, she attends the meetings of the European Council, along with her secretaries and administrative staff, and listens to what the European Council has to say to get strategic direction about what the European Commission should focus on as it prepares its draft legislation for the next month or 2 months or 6 months or whatever, right? And they come up with the details. And then when they come up with the draft details, those draft details are submitted to the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament for both of them to begin amending, criticizing, or voting on eventually, or possibly rejecting the proposal that the European Commission came up with. So the European Commission is a really unique, maybe the most important and unique European Union institution, because the European Commission is not supposed to be representing the national interests of the member states. The members of the European Commission are each from one member state of the European Union, but when they join the European Commission, they swear an oath to not pursue their national home government's policy interests first, but rather to promote the interests of the European Union. The European Commission is officially the guardian of the treaties of the European Union. It's explicitly referred to as the guardian of the treaties. And that was one, I think, of the reasons why the European Union wanted to try to reduce the size of the European Commission. Another reason was because they wanted people in Europe to stop thinking about the European Commission as each commissioner representing one nation. They really wanted to stop people thinking in that way. So like several years ago, if you went to the European Commission website, the European Commission website in europa.net, they would give you a description, of course, of each member of the European Commission, each of the members of the European Commission. And they used to have a little flag next to the name and picture of each member of the European Commission, highlighting from which country that person came. So if the European Commissioner from Spain would be there, and they would have the Spanish flag and the Estonian flag and the Lithuanian flag. And then just several years ago, the European Commission website of the European Union, on the European Union Europa portal, removed all of those flags. They stopped stating or explaining or highlighting which country each member of the European Commission comes from. So if you go to the Europa website and you look at the European Commission website, it easily tell you which country these commissioners come from. You have to really, you have to dig. You have to go on the internet, you have to type in Wikipedia to find out which country they come from, because the European Union does not want people of the European Union to think of those commissioners as representing the national interests of each member state of the European Union. They don't want them to think that. They want to push them away from that. Even though, of course, these European Commission members, they are senior level politicians who made a life career in politics back in their home countries, when they were former prime ministers of Portugal or prime ministers of Poland or foreign ministers of Bulgaria. They had developed a career as professional politicians in their respective national home states. So of course, when they join the European Commission after 10, 20, 30, 40 years, as a professional national politician in their home states, they know the political conditions and situations and environment back in their home country. So the Bulgarian commissioner on the European Commission, that person knows a lot about Bulgarian politics. the person who is representing Poland, who's from Poland, the Polish commissioner on the European Commission, he's not representing Poland, but that person, he knows a great deal about Polish politics. And of course, these people are going to use their knowledge about what is politically feasible and possible and what is not politically feasible and possible in their home country when they're talking to the other commission members to come up with draft legislation for the European Union to consider. So although officially they're not there to represent the national interests of their home country, they're still supposed to be experts on the politics of their home country. Because, you know, politics is the art of the possible. And so, I mean, what is politically possible? So the commission is an interesting body, and it is the treaties of the European Union. The most recent one, of course, that modified the European Union treaties is the Treaty of Lisbon, gives the treaties allocated to the commission the most important tasks. They are to act, as I said, as a guardian of the treaties. And it's written in those are the words it uses, the treaties use, that the commission is the guardian of the treaties of the European Union. And it's supposed to ensure also that when the European Union does finally adopt new laws and directives and regulations, that the commission is also supposed to monitor and look at the 27 member states to make sure they're actually implementing those laws and policies. And it's supposed to manage those programs, and it also has tremendous authority, not only in the European Union, but over the whole world, insofar as it's also supposed to be in charge of making sure that competition policy, competition is being maintained in the single market of the European Union. So if the European Commission, and particularly one European commissioner in particular, the European Commissioner for Competition Policy, that person is responsible for making sure that big companies like Google or Microsoft are not using their big market power to unfairly, in the view of the European Commissioner for Competition Policy, unfairly to exclude and crush and remove competitors in the marketplace at the cost of higher prices for European consumers, at the cost of less innovation, because the Google or Microsoft might use its tremendous dominance of its sectors of the economy to try to buy out competitors, new startups that come up with new ideas, and Microsoft might buy them out, or Google might buy them, or Facebook might buy them in order to remove that competition, and maybe they might incorporate the new idea that they bought into their own platform, into their own business. But at the same time, you know, they might limit it, or they might prevent other competitors from emerging. For example, like WhatsApp. Some of you might send messages on Facebook, right? Through Facebook Messenger. Messenger was a startup that Facebook bought and incorporated into the Facebook platform, right? And they have been accused of being so big, these companies, and so powerful with all their vast economic money resources, that they might be suppressing or preventing new startups from developing new technologies, because Facebook can use its tremendous economic wealth, or Microsoft or Google can use a tremendous economic wealth to buy competitors when they're still small, and suppress that competitor by making it part of its own business. And this impacts the rest of the world. So, you know, the European Commission fines Google, fines Microsoft, fines Facebook, and it also blocks, for example, mergers between big companies at times in the European Union. And if it blocks access to the European Union, remember, the European Union is one of the biggest, richest markets in the world. So if the European Union sets policy that restrains the activity of big companies in terms of mergers and acquisitions, then that's going to impact that company's well-being elsewhere and its profitability, even if it's based in the United States or if it's based in China. And so, as I said, the greatest practical power of the Commission lies in its sole right to propose policy. The Council and the Parliament can request the Commission to draft proposals. Yeah, so I said, for example, the Commission has the formal right of proposing new legislation. Only it can propose draft legislation for the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament to consider. But of course, if the Council and the Parliament ask the Commission to propose legislation, the Commission will do it. You know, the Commission is not going to say, no, we don't want to. Of course, they're going to do it. So the Council of Ministers, or the Council of the European Union, as it's also called, and the Parliament can request the Commission to draft proposals. And of course, the Commission will take that very seriously into account. In sum, the Commission is the most powerful existing international administration. It makes controversial decisions, particularly, for example, in competition policy, and of course, you know, with 27 member states, when it does make decisions, somebody's going to be unhappy to some varying degree, and so it does have to have some degree of political protection and resilience. The Commission's powers in economic and monetary union and in international trade negotiations are, you know, similar to what you would expect to see in the Korean government's negotiations with the international banks and companies, or the powers that the Korean government has in terms of regulating the economy of South Korea. The Commission has similar powers to national governments over the whole European Union in the economic area, in the business and economic area. But they still rely upon the national member states to take upon themselves the obligation to implement the policies that the European Union adopts. So the Commission, as I said, it's only about 23,000 people. You know, it depends if you count the translators, how many people work there. The total number of people that work for the European Commission in Brussels is about the same size as the city government of Paris. So, you know, that's a number thrown around. You know, do you include the translators that are involved? Because, you know, all of the business of the European Union has to be translated into the 23 or 24 different official languages of the European Union. But the European Commission is not a huge organization. It's about the size of the Paris city government. So when you hear European Union politicians, you know, trying to win elections and appeal to nationalist voters back in Poland or Hungary or France, they will attack the European Commission and those Eurocrats in Brussels, the Brussels civil service, as having too much authority over the well-being of Britain or France. And in fact, the European Commission is a small organization, relatively speaking, and it relies upon the member state governments, the member state civil services, the member state executive branches to implement the policies that the European Union adopts. So let me show you, of course, the European Commission is being challenged, and Ursula von der Leyen came in as the first female head of the European Commission after the 2019 European Parliament elections, and she was formally approved as the president of the European Commission on the eve of the pandemic, of course, before the pandemic started. And so she has been tremendously challenged, and the whole European Union has been tremendously challenged by the global emergency that is the pandemic. And so let me show you how the European Commission has become even more active in dealing with these challenges today in dealing with the Eurozone crises. And let me see if I can find, yeah, I think this is it here. So so let me ask you a question. Let me go back to, yeah.
I'm just asking because I'm just curious. Most of EU countries have introduced the euro, but why did the UK refuse to participate?
It's an excellent question, and I think a lot of people are still struggling to understand nationalism, to try to explain that, because I think a lot of people tend to assume that they tend to assume too much that money and profit is what drives political behavior. And the European union, it was meant to try to promote profitability and efficiency and more profit for more people through creating a single market. So why would Britain want to leave that and have more obstacles to free trade when almost, half of Britain's trade is with the rest of Europe? So is it irrational? I hate that word. I hate that word rational, irrational. It's a bad word, but it looks from an economic, materialistic point of view that somehow it's irrational. And this means, again, coming up with trying to understand the emotions and stereotyping that characterize nationalism and identity. People don't act rationalistically when it comes to their nation, right? People will sacrifice, many people, not everybody, but many people will sacrifice a lot of economic well-being if they think it's necessary to defend the sovereignty of their nation. And they tend to, nationalists, as I said earlier, they tend to overestimate the threats and dangers to their nations that they perceive. Let me go back to this file that I opened up earlier. And so let me make sure I'm sharing the screen. So here you see, we already covered this in class once before, right? What is nationalism? A nationalist is somebody who defines himself or herself as a member of a large group of people who constitute a community that is entitled to independent statehood and is willing to grant that community a primary and the primary terminal loyalty. And so what we see is that nationalists are more likely to stereotype and see dangerous threats and wonderful opportunities and stereotype the source of those perceived threats and opportunities with regard to their nation. So stereotyping is stupidity, but that's what nationalists do. They simplify, they oversimplify their understanding of the world, and they do so with great emotion, And they don't act, quote unquote, rationalistically. Now, I'm not saying everybody in Britain is a nationalist, and I'm not saying everybody in Germany or France or Italy is a nationalist. There are other values driving people, including, yes, including economic values. Yes, this does drive politics, but this is not the only factor driving politics. And often it's not the most important factor. People will sacrifice the economic well-being if they have to defend themselves from Japan or Germany or whomever. And so a nationalist is someone whose intense self-identification with community strongly affects their perception of reality. Another point I want to make is that history makes a difference. Countries change over time as a result of their experience. So Germany today, in 2021, is very different from Germany of 1941, 80 years ago. Germany is not as nationalistic as it was 80 years ago in 1941. Why? Because of German history, German experiences, and the fact that Germany has developed. Germany has become more prosperous, more stable. Germany has become more educated. But that experience in Germany or France and Italy includes humiliation and defeat, like we talked about last class. But the British, they don't believe they've ever been humiliated. British nationalism has never failed. They think they won both world wars. They believe, rightly or wrongly, stereotypically or not, that they don't need Europe to integrate with Europe to promote the well-being, including economic well-being of their nations. And so you see that they believe, and this is what Brexit people are arguing, we don't need to integrate under this European Union with its European Parliament and European Commission and European Court of Justice telling us what to do. We can create a free trade agreement with Canada, Australia, United States. And we don't need to create a supranational political bodies that are going to tell us what to do. We don't want that, we don't need that, and we don't have to accept that because we have other options. Now, they might be wrong or they may be right, but that argument appealed to many people, the people that voted for Brexit. Now, keep in mind, millions voted against Brexit, but 48% voted against, 52% voted in favor. So this person's self-identification affects their perception of reality, and they tend to stereotype, right? So and so we see this happening now, right? That the British, as I speak to you right now, they are what are they doing? They're really emphasizing this Anglo-Saxon, American, Canadian, Australian perspective on how to go about pursuing Britain's interest in the world now that Britain is leaving the European Union. So we covered that, I think, at the last class, how, for example, yeah, this is, okay, let's do this. Please respond. No, not that one. Is that it? Please respond to this following, to this statement. Let me see, it's causing me some difficulties here. 1 second, one more try here. Huh. Let me close something here. Just a second. Because I have too many screens open, so the screen share is causing trouble. Just a second. Let me close something here. Close that one. Okay. And open cake, and then we go here. Go back to this one, and let me see if I can screen share. Just a second. Here. Okay, so please respond to the following statement. Brexit and its political consequences will accelerate the integration of the militaries of France and Germany. Do you think that Britain's leaving the European Union and moving towards alliance with the United States and Australia, because as we covered the last class, right? Australia tore up its submarine purchase agreement with France, and Britain has moved in to broker selling nuclear submarine technology to Australia, its former British Empire colony, in cooperation with the United States to sell and develop nuclear submarine technology with Australia. And this has infuriated the French, and this must be in the Korean media right now going on, because it's being covered repeatedly now in the Western US media. It's in the New York Times. So, and this is continuing to be a topic of great discussion and dispute. So do you think, and of course, Britain is doing this after it left the European Union. And of course, the pandemic was the preoccupation of everyone. It still is the preoccupation, but now that the epidemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, is under some degree of control, at least in Britain, now we see Britain moving more assertively to promote its political and economic interests in Australia, in the Pacific, in alliance with the United States, because of the United States' concern with China. And Australia has torn up its $50–60 billion diesel contract with France, and to be replaced by the British contract to sell nuclear technology, submarine technology, in cooperation with the Americans to Australia. So my question to you is, do you think that Brexit and its political consequences will accelerate the response of France and Germany by integrating their militaries? Will we see France and Germany integrate their militaries more quickly now in response to Britain becoming more assertive as a nationalist actor in competing with and taking opportunities away from France, for example, particularly in countries and actors that are part of the Anglo-Saxon world, the Anglophone world, the English-speaking world? Are we going to see France and Germany respond to emphasize developing the European military capabilities more strongly by integrating the French and German military? So let me divide you up into two groups here, and let me cancel that, stop share, and into breakout rooms, and make you into two groups. And so we have two groups. So, oh, there's only 3 people here. So maybe I'll just go back to 1 because there's only 3 people. Okay, so you're all in room 1. What do you think? Where would you place yourself in, please join room 1. And where would you place yourself? Do you think Germany and France are going to show a stronger commitment to integrating their militaries in response to greater competition with Britain and in pursuing its own interests in the rest of the world, including in the Pacific area. So please join the room that I assigned you to and see if you can all decide where you fit on this scale. Do you think we're going to see Germany and France move more strongly to integrate their militaries like they've been talking about doing since the 1950s, but has not really made tremendous, before the pandemic, was not making tremendous speed. But now, as we're talking here now, you see Britain just very blatantly, trying to replace France in making economic and security deals with the other English-speaking countries, even at the expense of France, in the case of the nuclear submarine deal with Australia. So UJE, please join the group and try to come up to a position as to where you fit on the scale. And let me go back to the and so I will write a statement as well. Okay. Okay, so let me close the rooms and okay, so let me ask you, let me see who's going to speak for the group. Let me flip a coin because I want to encourage you all to speak. And so heads, it's Marie, and it's tails. So heads, it's Kim Dong-un, and it's tails. So UJE, where did you fit your group? Where was your group able to place itself along that scale that I opened up here? Agree, strongly agree, disagree? What do you think, UJE?
I'm not sure. It's hard for me to choose.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what about, let us see here. What about Hedges Marie? Marie, what do you think?
I agree.
Yeah. Why?
Yeah, because I think France and Germany are getting scared of the UK like forming alliances with Australia and the US like for maybe in the future. So I think that they want to prepare before. I don't know.
I think, they're not good. I don't think they're going to be afraid that they're going to be a military threat. They're going to be upset about the economic consequences of what Britain is doing. So British industries, American industries are going to benefit from this nuclear submarine agreement with Australia that was originally made with France. I mean, $60 billion, that's a lot of money. And now the Australians are pulling out. The French are furious. Although the Australians and the Americans were saying a long time, we're saying we sort of knew that this was obsolete. The Australians, if they're going to help us deal with China, including contain China, they have to have better technology than diesel or conventional submarines. Nuclear submarines can stay underwater for weeks, even months, without coming up. Because all you need is enough food for the people on the submarine. Diesel, you have to refuel. You don't have to refuel a nuclear submarine. So this was already out of date years ago. If you want the Australians to participate in military patrols in the South China Sea off the coast of China, and China is now punishing Australia for Australia complaining about Chinese behavior, particularly around Hong Kong and the COVID-19 outbreak. And so they put, sanctions and tariffs on Australian wine, and so, I mean, even though the French are saying they're furious, other people are arguing the French should have known that this was not going to really be sufficient. So, but the point is, what are the French and the Germans going to do? They're going to try to buy less and less British and American military equipment. They're going to buy French and German military equipment. And that means they're going to cooperate more closely together on a military level. I mean, that was the British argument regarding why they should be cooperating with the Australian military, because they're already closely allied. The British military and the Australian military, they're both from the British Empire. They both have the similar standards and technology and policies and procedure. It's easier for them to cooperate with the Australians and provide the technology and the policies for nuclear submarine, because they're all part of the old British Empire. They openly say that. So I would expect that the French and the Germans are going to say, okay, we'll let you get away with this time, but we're going to integrate our militaries more closely, the French and the German militaries, and we're going to start buying military equipment more from French and German companies. We're not going to buy so much from the Americans and the British. We're going to try to develop our own military capabilities. And they're already moving in that direction, right? These kinds of crises, they don't typically create suddenly unknown, previously unknown initiatives. There's already was a move a few years ago that you will read about at the end of the semester in chapter 15 of the course textbook, to develop a framework for military cooperation and military purchasing of military supplies. And they're going to emphasize, it's called PESCO. The permanent, what is it? The Permanent European Security and Cooperation Organization. And PESCO, P-E-S-C-O, is going to become more intensely active than it already is. And they're going to try to develop joint European, French and German military technology. And they're going to spend less money on buying American and British military supplies. And that means the European Commission will become involved. They'll place it under the European Economic Community Framework. So that means that the European Commission makes the proposals, the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers have to approve it, amend and approve it. So it'll be done in a political, economic, business framework, which means it will follow the European ordinary legislative procedure in which the Commission proposes, the Council of Ministers and the Parliament then amend and modify and approve or reject the proposal from the Commission. It will be done within the European economic framework. Kang Tong-un, no, see, who's next? Kang Tong-un, what did you have to say?
I don't know why the reason why they would engage in military integration, but I think military integration means that they have to plan for the war. So I think France and Germany would not do integration of the military.
I mean, I think even if they do this, they're of course going to insist that they're not challenging NATO, that they're not challenging the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that they're not challenging the Americans. They just want to become a more autonomous, independent partner. And probably the British and the Americans will accept that. The British, I mean, it's ironic because you're going to read later in the book, it was the British under Tony Blair when he was prime minister back in 1999, I think late 1990s, 1998, 1999, when he proposed with President Jacques Chirac of France to really develop a European defense and security policy, to really emphasize cooperation with the in military preparation and procurement, purchasing of military supplies at Saint-Malo in France, under Tony Blair, the Labour Prime Minister, and Jacques Chirac, President of France. And now here we are 22 years later, and the British have left the European Union, and they're no longer going to provide the leadership, because they had been, along with France, the two leading military powers in the European Union, France and Great Britain. Now Britain's out, and they are really pursuing, Boris Johnson, the Conservative Prime Minister, is really pursuing this strong, assertive British effort to be global Britain. That's the term, global Britain. It says here, as relations between France and the United States sink to their lowest level in decades, Britain has emerged as the unlikely winner in a maritime security alliance that has sowed anger and recrimination across 3 continents. The British government played an early role in brokering a 3-way alliance with the United States and Australia to deploy nuclear-powered submarines in the Pacific, according to the officials in London and Washington. The landmark agreement prompted Australia to pull out of a $66 billion deal for diesel-electric submarines from France, provoking fury in Paris and quiet satisfaction in London. Nationalism, global Britain, the British lion is roaring again. For British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who will meet this coming week with President Joe Biden at the White House to speak to the United Nations, it is his first tangible victory in a campaign to make post-Brexit Britain a player on the global stage. That's nationalism. Right? Since leaving the European Union 18 months ago, Britain has cast about for a place in the world. Brexiters latched onto the phrase global Britain. I mean, they talk about global Korea, right? Global Korea was a big slogan of the Korean government. Global Britain, which seemed more like a marketing slogan than a coherent foreign policy. Well, now you see the substance of this. So yet the deal sealed Wednesday, in which the United States and Britain would supply Australia with the submarines, confirmed Britain's status as a military power with nuclear expertise, as well as a trusted ally of the United States. It also lent credibility to Johnson's effort to build a British presence in Asia, a strategy that at first looked mostly like a nostalgic throwback to its imperial past. Now, Britain has negotiated trade deals with Australia, Japan, and South Korea, and deployed an aircraft carrier to help the United States keep an eye on China in the South China Sea, where Beijing is asserting its own imperial ambitions by constructing a chain of military installations. It goes on here. Britain and Australia, time's up. Britain and Australia officials said, made that sales pitch, again, emphasizing the so-called special relationship with the United States. And for all of its satisfaction in London, Britain still faces daunting geopolitical realities. The submarine deal is likely to worsen its relationship with France, which is already strained by post-Brexit disputes over fishing rights and migrants crossing the English Channel. The French government is disdain. Well, anyway, just to show you, this is a conflict. So I want to get your participation credit straightened away here. So let me share screen again with the cyber campus, and as our last task, to ask you to vote on whether or not you think that Brexit and its political consequences will accelerate integration of the militaries of France and Germany. So please vote.
Professor,
And that's-
can I say something?
Yes.
I have something to say about that vote. It will be harder for the France and Germany, for the UK to remain, for the EU to remain as a member, and I don't know. It's just my thought. And
Well, I mean, I think the UK, United Kingdom is still part of NATO. It's still part of NATO. So what this will mean, I think, is going to be primarily focused on I predict it's going to be primarily focused upon Germany and France, going back to what they had originally planned in the 1950s with the European defense community that failed to be approved by the French Assembly in the 1950s after the Coal and Steel Committee was approved. And they'll go back to that and they'll develop that further. And the most clear evidence of that will be in the Germans and the French cooperating more closely in their businesses and defense industry cooperation to develop new military technologies and equipment that they will supply to the integrated German and French military. But that's just a prediction, okay? So that's where we'll stop today because I have to get ready for the next class. And so let me close the class and see you on Friday. Bye.